Hi, human beings of the internet, it's Ryan from Immaterial Gamers, and we've had a couple of podcasts over the past couple of weeks that explained our year in 2022, which was to look at a couple of games that we played over the year that didn't necessarily come from that year, and put them in our little game of the year type thingy that we went for. But there was one person who did miss out on this, Duncan, who really wanted to talk about a game that he enjoyed. And, well, he might not made it for the podcast, but he definitely gave me something that could just be explained in a few minutes for a video, so content? Let's go for it. Here's Duncan and his Game of the Year for 2022.
The game I've chosen for my Game of the Year, or whatever we're going to call it here at Immaterial Gamers, is Symphony of War, the Nephilim Saga. A grid-based tactical RPG in the same style as the Fire Emblem series, Symphony of War is an indie take on what has now become a relatively mainstream genre thanks to the aforementioned Fire Emblem franchise. And what it has achieved with the shockingly few resources it has is honestly pretty impressive. Built off of the RPG Maker 2003 engine, of all things, this low-tech, high-ambition game manages to capture all of the fun of the Fire Emblem franchise with a few twists that set it apart from being a straight-up clone. For starters, battles are squad-based, where units can be placed on a 3x3 grid based on their size and the leadership score of their squad's leader. The choice of specializing in one type of unit per squad, or balancing the strengths of a squad to make them more self-sufficient, is a noteworthy choice because there's pros and cons to doing both. Each unit also ascends to a tiered, branching promotional path, which allows for pretty significant customization of each unit, with the choice being to either cater to one unit's strengths and work around them, or to bend their abilities to the needs of the squad they're a part of. There are also numerous side objectives to complete throughout each mission, and they include additional resources, interacting with certain NPCs, meeting certain time-based objectives. It just gives each map a lot more variety and intrigue. Even simple route missions can be a lot more interesting than killing everything in sight, because you've got all these things to do. Speaking of interactables on the map, one of the more noteworthy additions is the existence of temples, which allow defeated units to be revived for a fee. On the lowest difficulty, this isn't really important because units don't have permadeath and the game is a lot easier, but on higher levels of challenge where that is a concern, this can be a really helpful mechanic for players who want to keep units that they're heavily invested in alive without restarting the map. The low cost of reviving units means that the cost is essentially irrelevant and really just comes to a matter of time investment. These features, and a few more that I'm not going to bother covering in this really brief review, show signs of an intentional choice to make the game distinct from Fire Emblem enough that people won't have to make direct comparisons, even though that's exactly what I'm doing here. But it also shows awareness of certain concepts, desires, and frustrations existing within Fire Emblem and its fandom, and a desire to create, at least in some ways, a better player experience. Overall, I have a few criticisms, mostly minor. I mean, obviously the game doesn't have the technical or visual robustness of a Fire Emblem game, and it's a pretty small development company, and they just lack the ability to dump thousands of hours into art and animation. I mean, that being said, even for an indie game, the game's visuals are kind of spotty at the best of times, which could be the fault of the developers in making a specific artistic choice that I just don't like, the outdated game engine, or a combination of both. There's no way to know for sure. It does have really good music, which does help make up for it in some ways. I would also contend that it's really difficult, especially at higher difficulty levels, to push for the viability of unnamed player characters leading and being a part of their own squad. There's a pretty clear step down in power between these nameless NPC characters and the actual named portrait-bearing player characters. As a matter of UI, I'm also frustrated by the fact that there is an enemy threat radius indicator, but there's no way to keep that indicator on the screen past a certain input, which is really frustrating because that's like a key mechanic in Fire Emblem that they've had for decades, and the fact that they have it shows an awareness that they have this thing and that they wanted to have it themselves, but for some reason they don't allow you to keep it on the screen, and I don't know if that was a design choice or a technical limitation, but it's really annoying. Overall, Symphony of War isn't going to blow anyone away with its technical complexity or visual grandeur or gripping narrative, but it is nonetheless a competent, well-designed indie game that offers a legitimate alternative to a somewhat narrow and samey genre. It is my choice for Game of the Year.